Mr. Brunner asked me to come today because of, well, what was just explained. Sometimes, I guess, on the campaign trail, things get, the schedule can get bumbled around a little bit and jumbled, and things you have to learn to improvise, adapt, and overcome, sometimes at a moment's notice. So he asked me to come here and speak on his behalf today. And so, well, I think what I'm going to do, I got about 20 minutes, so all I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about John Brunner and some of the reasons why I support him. First and foremost, I think if you listen to radio or television, if you've seen any of his flyers or you heard him speak, we probably all, at this point, most people, most Republicans, most voters, know that he's a pretty successful businessman from the St. Louis area. Taking a business that employed a relative handful of people, and he grew it to now being able to employ about 1,400 of our fellow Missourians. Here's a guy who came out of the Marine Corps, has a pretty profound understanding of economics, and so a couple of the reasons that I support him, because first of all, right now, if we're going to be really honest about our whole economic situation, the news media, other politicians from either sides of the parties, they come out and they say, the economy is doing good, the economy is doing bad, and all too often we find that they're just using this through their own political lens, right? You see people in the news. The Republicans say the economy is bad because we've got a Democrat in office. The Democrats say the same thing when the Republicans are in office. One thing that we can't avoid, one thing that nobody can really get around, is the fact that right now we've already broke $15.5 trillion in debt. That's a dangerous place to be in. It's a dangerous place to be in when the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, says that our greatest national security threat at this point in America is not so much Al-Qaeda as much as it is our national debt. Because right now we got a fence that we want to build across the southern border, but people in Washington, D.C. are saying, well, where are we going to get the money? We're borrowing so much money from China, we take it, and then we give it to all these other foreign countries, but that leaves us and the taxpayers to pay it back and pay the interest. Things don't make sense. As a financial advisor, one of the things that I'm able to look at whenever I look at different legislation or different policies is I'm able to look at something, kind of, usually, and decide whether or not we're using good, sound financial principles. In America today, in almost every level of government, we are not using good, sound financial principles in anything. And it's unfortunate that in America today, we have people in government who do not understand what the proper role of government is. And so when you couple that with this lack of financial discipline, it's a recipe for absolute disaster. For example, what's probably on all of our minds is what happened yesterday with the Supreme Court decision, right? Here's a perfect opportunity to say that people in the courts, even some of the people that we thought were the good conservative ones, do not understand the proper role of government. And we're going to have a financial catastrophic event as a direct result. So when I look at John Brunner, I've gotten to talk to him on several occasions, I believe that this is somebody who understands the proper role of government. And if you want to identify what the proper role of government is, you don't need to look any further than the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Because in that paragraph, and this is U.S. law, okay? Declaration of Independence is U.S. law in America. And in the second paragraph, it says very clearly that governments are instituted for the sole purpose of just protecting the freedom of the people. And that includes our economic freedom. So here we got somebody who's been a very successful businessman, and even more so than that, what's a good way to put this? When I was in the Marine Corps, I remember going through Marine Corps Martial Arts Instructor School, and I remember not getting picked to participate in one of the fights, right? Because we have to fight to hone our skills. I remember not getting picked for one of the fights because my squad leader said, Paul, you don't know how to fight because you've never actually been in a fight, so you have to go through a lot of training first. Now that's not, don't confuse that with people that are career politicians being in the fight. The way I look at this is we got somebody who's been involved in business, the pharmaceutical industry, chemicals, things like that. This is somebody who's been in a direct fight against the intrusive regulations of the federal government, the EPA, and all these unregulated, unelected bureaucracies that are passing federal laws and wrapping and choking our business owners out of the economic freedom that they need to succeed and prosper in America. Our founding father says that we need a citizen soldier. George Washington himself set the tone, he set the pace for American leadership. He only served 2 years as president and he stepped out. And they encouraged people from industry, people from the military, people from clergy. They encouraged those people to step up into office because they know what it's like to be on the receiving end of an intrusive government. And I think that in particular in this U.S. Senate race, there's only one person that's come in really out of any real industry or any real civilian, let's put it this way, civilian activity. So I think John Brunner's a good person because he understands what it's like to be victimized by the intrusiveness of the federal government. He's a United States Marine. He's a captain in the infantry, and this is a couple things I want to talk about just for very briefly, because as a sergeant in the Marine Corps myself, I can relate to this, and I might be able to see this. And if we got any other Marines or service members or veterans in here today, you might be able to relate to this also. In the Marine Corps, in the military in general, discipline is key. You have to have discipline. They say that complacency kills. I was an infantry squad leader, and so when I was overseas, I remember having to get onto my Marines over and over and over again, because every now and then, if there wasn't a battle, if there wasn't a fight, they'd get complacent. And I remember one particular time we did get complacent. Some of my Marines got complacent. We had some guys, had some bad guys that got within 30 meters of our position. Our perimeter was 800 meters. We let them get 770 meters too close before we started firing shots. Complacency kills. I think that sometimes when you have people that are career politicians, sometimes they get in there and everything starts off good, but over the course of time, we notice that they're beginning to get a little bit complacent on some things. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that we need to make sure that we keep a watchful eye. Thomas Jefferson said, have a watchful eye. That way we can rally and recall them to the reasons that we sent them there in the first place. And if they don't, let's let somebody else, maybe somebody out of ministry, that's what they advised. That's what our founding fathers advised. Let's let them get in there. He also understands being a Marine and being a Marine officer, being an infantry captain. He understands the proper role of government. Here's a guy who took an oath to the United States Constitution. I've got to talk to him on several occasions. We got to talk about it. And this is really good too. He understands that the proper role of a United States Senator is to protect the sovereignty of the states. Okay? A lot of people don't understand this, but U.S. Senators used to be appointed by the state legislatures. Because our U.S. Congress is supposed to represent the people, and the United States Senate is to represent the states. That's how our system of federalism works. The state and the federal governments can be checks and balances on each other. Well, nowadays, the people elect the senators, so we kind of lost a lot of the discipline that they used to have in just protecting the sovereignty of the states. But what we haven't lost is that the proper role description, the job description of a U.S. Senator is to protect the sovereignty of the states. And whenever the federal government reaches their dirty little paws beyond their constitutional jurisdiction, it's up to the United States Senator to vote no and shut them down. That way we can govern ourselves here at home better. I believe that we can govern ourselves better here at home than people a few thousand miles away. I really believe that. Our founding fathers believed it, and they fought a bloody war for independence because they believed it that much. Another thing that I learned in the Marine Corps is knowledge is power. And I'm trying to remember your name. What was your name again? Yeah. Peter, that's right. I know Peter from a few meetings. I really like him. He's a good speaker and everything. And what he was talking about is good smear campaigns, trying to drag somebody through the mud. I believe it's unacceptable. But one thing that we got to make sure that we're vigilant and aware of, make sure that we understand the difference between a smear and a painful truth. There is a difference. And sometimes whenever you hear things, and you hear things that you otherwise wouldn't normally like to hear, a lot of times people jump and say it's a smear campaign. We're dragging somebody through the mud. But there are painful truths too. And so we need to make sure that through this primary process, whenever we hear something, just investigate it ourselves. Don't take anything as a smear. Don't take anything necessarily really as a painful truth, but just make sure that we look into it. Make sure that we look up the references that were cited. Because if we are sending people to Washington, D.C. that haven't been exercising the discipline, if we're sending people to Washington, D.C. that have helped us get to this $15.6 trillion in debt, it might be in our best interest to make sure that we send somebody there that's got some discipline and a little bit of experience with budgets, a little bit of, especially the kind of budgets where their own livelihood is directly on the line. I've talked now for only about 9 minutes. Now, I've got about another 10.5 minutes. If anybody wants to ask me any questions about John Brunner, I'll answer them to the best of my abilities. Or if you want to ask me about different issues or different policies and how I support them or why I support them for those reasons, I'd be more than happy to do that. Yes, sir. Another opinion that says that Glenn Guttmeyer is the most conservative in the state. So there's a lot of different gauges out there. But if you look up in the United States Code, you'll actually see that the Declaration of Independence is in there as law. What I don't want to do right now, is I will describe for you from the best way that I can. And I know that this is, there's a lot of Todd Aiken supporters in here. I know that this is probably his territory. But I told John Brunner I'd come up here and do my best, so I'm doing it, all right? I'm not going to talk about anything in particular that might have been said, but what I will say this, though. I think that sometimes people say, hey, so-and-so voted for this. And there's two ways to spin this. One is the fact that you're bringing that up is an attack, it's a smear. The other way is to say, but the thing is you actually voted for this, it's a painful truth.
Oh,
And,
I understand
sure.
the concept. I'd like to decide for myself what you're...
I can tell you one of the reasons why I'm deciding not to vote for Todd Akin and I'm deciding to vote for John Brunner. Because John Brunner, first of all, the whole citizen senator aspect, and I have a really hard time right now voting for anybody who's voted to raise the debt ceiling over and over and over again. I personally have a hard time with that. And so that's one of those particular situations. Yes, ma'am. I think he would. Now, I'm not going to speak for him and tell him whether or not he directly would or wouldn't, but I do know, I think that it would all depend on how the debates and how committees go, and kind of also what John Adams and George Washington both said. George Washington said this in his farewell address. And I think that some of these issues that our founding fathers had to deal with because of our particular culture, I think that sometimes things are a little bit more difficult to get across to the public. John Adams said that our particular Constitution is for a moral and religious and a Christian people. George Washington said that freedom is the indispensable supports of freedom are religion and morality. Unfortunately, today we have a population that's being dumbed down over and over and over again from a central education bureaucracy. So we've got people in America today. I went to a high school and got to speak, and these kids didn't even know what three branches of government there were. There's people that think that all three branches of government are co-equal. They're not co-equal, they're co-sovereign. The most powerful is supposed to be the United States House of the U.S. Representatives. That's supposed to be the most powerful. In Missouri today, I'm not so sure that people among the states want state sovereignty the way that we used to. And because of different levels of corruption, sometimes I think we've entered a new era where we have to weigh whether or not we would be able to return the right amount of statesmen if we went back to that process. Now, I wrote about this in a book that I wrote called Don't Tread on Me. I wrote specifically about the 17th Amendment. And since I wrote that book, I understand that the discussion, there's multiple layers to it. I think 50, 60 years ago to have an outright repeal of the 17th Amendment would have been a fantastic thing. Today, because the population, and because our House of Representatives in multiple states aren't made up of the caliber of people that our founding fathers were. So right now, I think maybe I, as citizen Paul Curtman, would like to have a say in who my U.S. Senator is versus my SEIU ACORN endorsed representative that I used to have. So I think that there's two different ways to look at it, and I'm still working on that myself. But I think though that if we had a culture, if we had a particular political education and God-fearing environment, I have no doubt in my mind that it would, absolutely. Yes, sir. First thing that I know that he would do, we have people that talk about bureaucracies that they'd eliminate, and it's one thing to say that you want to eliminate this bureaucracy and that bureaucracy, but I think that when you have somebody that says that they want to eliminate those bureaucracies because they've been in particular victimized by them over and over and over again, and that the reason that they're probably not as successful as they could be, and the reason they can't employ more people as they could be employing, is because you got these bureaucracies that are holding them down and choking them out of their ability to succeed and prosper. I believe that when he says that he will do it, he absolutely will do it, because he's been fighting with them throughout his whole career. And the other thing too, I can't name you a specific. He definitely could, I cannot, but I know that he understands more than anybody else probably that economic prosperity follows the path of least resistance. That's a truth of economic law, okay? Economic prosperity follows the path of least resistance. So if we want to succeed and prosper, you have to make sure that people have the most economic freedom that they can possibly have. Start getting rid of some of these bureaucracies that are unelected, some of these bureaucracies that keep wrapping this red tape. I believe that he would do it. I believe that he would do it. And he definitely could. As far as policies, what he would and would not do, those are questions that are better left to John Brunner or somebody who's from the official campaign. But I'm just telling you why I'm supporting him. These 4 term limits. Right, well he is doing it here. There's 1,400 people employed in the St. Louis area. He creates jobs here. And as a businessman, but I'm about to answer your question. Of course he would, but you see, we have a government bureaucracy. Right now, in the state of Missouri, we're introducing, in this House of Representatives, we introduce jobs bills, right? But it's not necessarily dependent on the federal government to create jobs. The thing that the government does as far as job relations go, the federal government chases jobs overseas. The federal government says if you want to succeed and prosper, you're going to have to do it overseas because we don't want you here. For example, the Chrysler plant, which is just north of my district, the federal government sent them billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of stimulus money and said, here you go, this is what you need to help create jobs. Chrysler took that money and they used that money to finance the move of the whole factory to Canada and Mexico, and then they tore everything down. Of course he will. He believes that we need to have jobs in America. He wants America to succeed and prosper. That's why he kept his plant here. That's why he lives here in America. Absolutely. Any other questions? Yeah, I'm really sorry that he couldn't be here. Saturday, June 30th at 5 o'clock in Warrenton, Missouri. That's tomorrow, right? Okay, making sure. JohnBrunner.com. JohnBrunner.com. And I'm just going to take another 30 seconds to just wrap this up because my time's expired. But I spent 10 years in the Marine Corps and I had people that died because people in federal government would not be accountable for the troops that the military was taking. So we got people that died overseas, people in my squad, 2 of my Marines were killed, and we got their congressmen that are refusing to take accountability because they refuse to follow the Constitution, okay? They won't take accountability. They pass it all off to the president or to the other party or to somebody else. We need somebody in Washington who's lived a life of accountability because their livelihood and their ability to succeed and prosper has been a direct reflection of whether or not they've been accountable, even in their own personal lives. And so the reason I'm voting for John Brunner, the reason I support John Brunner, is because I believe that he believes that the proper role of government is to help keep Americans free. I know that he has experience with operating actual, physical, real-world operating budgets, and I know that he hasn't voted to extend himself into debt, and I don't think he's going to do it for the American people. I think that he would vote no every time a vote came up to raise the debt ceiling again. $15.6 trillion in debt. We have crossed a line where we're not even making enough money, we're not even generating enough revenue in order to pay for that. So people like me who's 31 years old and everybody that's younger than me, it's a nightmare for us. And I believe John Brunner is a fiscal conservative. I believe he is a fiscal hawk. I have no doubt in my mind that he is. And I believe that he has the best interests of American people and his own employees at heart. And I'm voting for him because I think we need a citizen senator. I think we need somebody to come in from the real world, somebody who has real world experience and knows what it's like to be victimized by these intrusive regulations of the federal government. Thank you very much.